Okay, so it's time for another Masters of the Universe Revelation unboxing, and I have Moss Man. So, funny story about this guy is when I bought the He-Man and Skeletor figures, uh, they had Moss Man at the time, and I was like, well, I'm already buying He-Man and Skeletor, and they still got plenty of Moss Man, so I'll go ahead and wait on this one just a minute. But when I went back to that store, they were all gone, everything except for like two Skeletors. So I missed my boat on getting Moss Man from that store. But when I went to a different Walmart today, and I looked in the toy section and didn't see anything, and was rather disappointed. And then went back towards the electronics, and I was poking around there, and I found where somebody had set Moss Man down in the book section. I don't know if it was something where they were trying to hide it for later, you know, but if they did, they didn't pick a very good hiding spot because it was just right there on the shelf. It might have been the sort of thing where they put it down so they could go to the restroom because the restroom's like right over there. But you know, if that was the case, sorry, buddy, you snooze, you lose. You shouldn't have left it there. So, so I saw this Moss Man, and I'm like, well, they don't have any other Revelations figures here, so they must have sold out of them already. So I better grab that Moss Man. So, out of the four figures that were in that assortment, Moss Man was actually probably the one I wanted the most. I got He-Man and Skeletor first because, it's He-Man and Skeletor, and I figured those would probably be better for videos, which at the time of this recording I still haven't uploaded because I'm still having issues with my internet. But hopefully I'll have everything uploaded soon. So a whole saga awaits people who are going to be patient about this. The Evil-Lyn figure is not bad, but it's more based on her design on the show, like in the modern, like the stuff that takes place, after. And I don't, I'd rather have a classic style Evil-Lyn to go with these. I've seen the second wave for these now, and much the same way. I want Spikor because, like Moss Man, I don't actually have a classics version of Spikor. That's one of the reasons I'm excited to have this guy is because I figure he'll probably go with my classics figures pretty well. Uh, but I want Spikor, and I want the Man at Arms figure because that looks pretty great. I might get Beastman. I'm definitely not getting that Tila because I don't really like that Tila design. Sorry, folks. Sorry, you can call me a misogynist man baby all you want, but it's just that Tila design is too current year. It's just it doesn't have the timeless quality that I feel like a lot of the Masters of the Universe designs have, and 20 years from now, trust me, it's going to look very dated. Mark my words, I said it here first. And this little piece of tape at the top, trying to get all these pieces of tape with my razor blade. I don't know where the X-Acto knife is. It disappeared. If there's one thing you don't want to disappear on you, it's an X-Acto knife. Because if you find it, it might not be in the most pleasant of ways. You know what I mean. You might wind up like stabbing yourself with the thing. Is there a little piece of tape there? Maybe I went from the wrong side. Yeah, no, this is the right side. This side doesn't even open up at all. So, I'm going to try to open it up as gently as possible. No, it's tearing. Modern action figures packages. Let's take a moment before I take them out of the package to admire the artwork on the back. Moss Man sneaking around. It looks like a swamp. You got Beastman and Skeletor over here. Probably up to some kind of nefarious purpose, and Moss Man don't look too happy about it. So let's go ahead and get Moss Man out of here. When I first saw the Moss Man figure, I thought it looked kind of undersized, but we'll see how it looks next to a Classics figure, because like I said, I was hoping to display him with Classics, if nothing else. He's got this really cool tendril, like these roots or vines or branches or whatever you want to call them, that can be growing out of his arm. Moss Man himself comes out of the package fairly easily. None of those damnable rubber bands that I hate so much. And along with the hands that he's got already, which these are kind of gripping hands, he has 4, count them, 4 extra hands to for various posing purposes. I kind of feel like they could have knocked these down to 2 and given us a mace. I would have liked to have had a mace for this Mossman. Yeah, I know, he doesn't have a mace in the animated series, blah, 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 but it wouldn't have been the first time that Mattel bothered to give us a bonus accessory to pay tribute to the original figure. And that would have been nice to have. I'm not complaining about it. Hang on a second. I'm going to take a slight break, so I'm going to go over here and let's see, where is it? Yeah, here it is. I found it. I'm not quite as unprepared as I seem. I'm just a little unprepared. But here is Classics He-Man. To be specific, this is the Ultimates version of Classics He-Man, and his armor has come undone in the back. His armor is a lot softer than the original Classics, so it comes undone a lot easier. It'll just be sitting on my shelf and come undone. This is my favorite He-Man action figure, by the way. And if we put Mossman next to him, yeah, they scale pretty nicely. I think so. He does look a little leaner, I think, than I would like. I would probably err towards Mossman being more bulky than He-Man, if I had to pick one or the other. But I still think these would look pretty good on the shelf next to each other. So, that's not too bad at all. He's pretty cool looking. They did a really good job sculpting in the detail of the mossy texture. And the paint is good. It's a nice flat green. You know, I would have liked to have had him be flocked. But I figure that maybe with him being based specifically on an animated version, they didn't want to put too much flocking on him because it might interfere with the design. That's my theory as to why they didn't flock Mossman. His head's a little on the small side, I think, but that's par for course on these figures. I think it's just going to be part of the aesthetic style choices that they make. You know, he's got like this nice rocker joint at the abs, so that gives you all kinds of different, posing options. It's nice and well articulated. And then he's got a twist at the waist. Unfortunately, no power punch. But this is supposed to be an adult collector line, so, they probably want to eschew the gimmicks that you often get in the ones that are more aimed at children. So, it's an adult collector line, but it's still in the kids' toy aisle. So, Scott Knightlick would tell you that means it's still intended for kids to play with. But I'll leave that up there for you to judge in the audience. So, the ankles seem pretty well articulated, but it's going to be, because the feet are splayed so wide, they're supposed to look like roots growing out of the ground, but that's going to make it so it's a little trickier to get everything flat on the ground because it's so wide. So you're going to have to work at that a little bit. And it seems like the joints are kind of a little stiff, but I'm sure you can get them loose with a little work. So let's do what I'm sure everybody's looking forward to seeing, and that's putting this big old tendril on his arm and seeing how that works. That just pops right on. There we go. So if you miss him having his mace for a weapon, he could probably still use this as a big honking club and smack people with it. So that's nice. And also he could probably use it for what I'm sure is the intended purpose of grasping his enemies. It does seem like it's a bit stiff, but you could probably fit arms and legs in between the tendrils. And in fact, since I've got He-Man here, thanks for volunteering. We'll let He-Man be the victim, even though he's a good guy. But we'll just pretend like they're playfully sparring and practicing to keep up their warrior skills. So, he can trap He-Man's hand in the tendrils. Maybe I could even fit his head in there. Like he's trying to pick the bad guy up by the head or something. So, I wish they had have made these, in hindsight, I wish they had have made these a little softer and more pliable. maybe even put a wireframe in there so they could be a little posable. And you could have them actually like wrap around like Beast Man or whoever you want to have them fight. I hadn't noticed when I put this on here, but it actually is supposed to go on here a certain way. This is how it's supposed to go on here. And I say that because that's the back of the hand, and that's the palm of the hand. So it should be on the arm, facing like that. And it is supposed to be his right hand. I just went with his right hand just kind of arbitrarily. I figured it didn't matter. But if you look at how it's set up, you can see where his thumb is supposed to be and everything like that. So that is supposed to be his right hand. Now, that having been said, that doesn't mean you can't, put it on his left arm and just pretend it's a toy. You can do whatever you want to with it. But it's interesting to note that the designers gave it a specific function and that it actually is supposed to be on there in a specific way. So, interesting to note. That's all I'm saying. So, I would recommend this figure for anybody who's a fan of Mossman and wants to have that character represented, especially if they're going with the Revelations line and they want a consistency in the design of that. If you're like me and you never managed to get the Classics version, I think it'll go just fine with that. It is, pretty closely in scale. Like I said, I feel like he's a little leaner than I would probably like for Mossman to be in the, as compared to He-Man. But not, like, ridiculously leaner. They still look like they go pretty well together. He's a little bit taller than He-Man, but he just doesn't... The Revelations figures don't quite have the bulk in the upper body like the Classics ones do. The Classics ones are very much supposed to follow along with that 1980s vintage toy aesthetic, and I think that the Revelations figures are supposed to look a little more realistic in terms of the body build and stuff, which I don't know if that really makes too much sense, because if you've seen the Revelations cartoons, they're all pretty ridiculously, over pumped, like you imagine a He-Man character to be. I think it probably would have worked better if they had just used the Classics bodies instead of coming up with these new bodies. Personally, they're not bad. I like them just fine, but I think the Classics ones would have worked even better. But I kind of suspect Mattel doesn't have access to the Classics molds anymore. I kind of figure that they either leased or sold those outright to Super 7, and I'm kind of starting to lean towards maybe they sold them to Super 7 because they haven't gotten them back yet, even though they took back the rights to the Masters of the Universe toy line. So here he is with one of the open hands. So that looks pretty nice. And there's two different kinds of open hands. One that's more open and one that's slightly less open, if that makes any sense. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think the extra hands were overkill. I think they could have given us just one set of these extra hands and then used the rest of the parts budget to give us a mace instead. I think that would have been better. He doesn't need all these extra hands. I think that having 2 sets of hands would have been sufficient. He doesn't need 3 sets of hands. I mean, that's like 6 hands he's got. That's kind of ridiculous. And what's he supposed to hold in this hand? Because he doesn't have a mace. Maybe I'll wind up giving him the mace from the Origins Castle Grayskull. I don't like that version as much as the vintage one, but it'd be something, And it's more that sort of dusty bone color than the brown he should have. But, whatever. Any port in a storm, I guess. So I think if you turn the feet outwards like this, that way the ankles kind of rock this way. You see what I'm talking about? That might be the best way to sit. Yeah, I can sit him flat. He's on the laptop right now. But just trust me when I say his feet are about as flat as I can imagine them being. So Mossman, yeah, he gets a recommend, even though there were some decisions that were made that I think probably could have been made better. But it's not a bad figure. It's a good figure, in fact. I don't mind that they didn't flock him, because like I said, I think they were trying to go for more fidelity to the animated design. And he actually does have a lot of detail in there that, wouldn't have necessarily gone onto an animated figure. So, but they still had more control over it, I think, is the thing. So, so yeah, that's Moss Man. That's pretty much it for that. And hopefully, I'll have more Masters of the Universe stuff for you soon. But there's just not a whole lot that's out right now. Now that I've got all of these, and mainly right now, I'm looking for that big set with Battle Armor He-Man in the chrome that they're selling at Target, because that looks just really super sweet to me, that He-Man figure. I kind of wish they weren't selling it with Battle Cat. I wish they just sold that He-Man figure on its own, and I would gladly buy it, like, by itself. But, you know, the stand is really cool, so I'm happy about that. I just don't like the Battle Cat with the blood all over it. I don't really need another Battle Cat, and that one doesn't really bring a whole lot more to the party that really encourages me to double dip, because he's bloody Battle Cat, and I'm like, you poor thing. He's hurt. Battle Cat's hurt. Stop hurting him. He's already dead. But yeah, like, maybe I'll put the regular Battle Cat on the stand and put the chromey sort of He-Man on that, and that'll look cool. But I'm looking forward to that He-Man figure, though. That's the main thing. So anyway, I'm keeping an eye out to see what else I can find on Amazon, because there's still a lot of Origins figures I don't have. I don't have Roboto, for example, so I need to get Roboto. And I don't have Triclops. And I keep forgetting I don't have Triclops, because I made a custom of Triclops that turned out pretty awesome. And anytime I see Triclops on Amazon, I'm like, oh yeah, they made him. I should probably get the one that they actually made. Man. Oh, one other thing I should mention about him, he's got that same sort of thigh cut like the He-Man and Skeletor figures have, but since his thighs are, you know, kind of very exaggerated and Rudy looking thighs, it's a lot more obvious on this one than it is on them, and the loincloth doesn't quite cover up the joint. Like, if you look at the classics loincloth and the way the thighs are constructed there, it hides the joint pretty well. I mean, you can still see it, but it's just not as visible, and if you notice it, it's just not quite as glaring. But here the cut is kind of like in the middle of the thigh, and it doesn't have that sort of layering effect like the classics had. So you either have to match it up exactly, like as exactly as you can, or it's just going to be that little bit off, and that might get on your nerves. And, you know, sometimes, like, even the way it's molded, you can't even get it, like, 100%. Like, there's still, like, just a little bit of imperfection there. It's really annoying. So, so yeah, it's up to you how you want to do that, or you just want to completely ignore the joints there. Maybe you can, but I can't. So, anyway, but still, it's a nice looking figure. I'm glad to have it. So, even though I'm complaining about it, it's still a positive review. So, hopefully I'll have more to show you soon, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.